All right. Hello. So I'm going to say up front one thing, just to be super clear, and maybe you won't chase me off the stage. My team had nothing to do with snowfall, nothing at all. But I am going to talk about it today, and I'm going to talk about a lot of other things. But my name is Pilhofer. That's my Twitter handle, and this is where I work. This is what my team does. These are the skills represented in interactive news. But really, what we really do is we tell stories. In fact, we tell a special kind of story, a story that I'm going to focus on today, which I describe as native digital storytelling. And native digital storytelling is different. It takes the power of the web, the power of digital, and turns it into narrative. And so what we all do as journalists, which I've been my entire career, is tell stories. And what this talk is about today is why we are so spectacularly bad about doing something that we should be really good at. And I think it starts maybe with this guy. I'm a tennis player. This is my hero growing up, John McEnroe. Anybody who ever watched John McEnroe play, knows the guy is an amazing tennis player, but what is his best shot? Right? It's the volley. And I've played tennis for something like 35 years, and I think I've hit 3 good volleys in my entire life. And it's so easy. It just looks so easy. That's it. That's the whole shot. But for some reason, I and many of my fellow tennis players cannot do it. And a pro described it to me once as the easiest shot no one can hit. And I think that the analogy to news is pretty much the same way. That digital storytelling, really, when you break it down to its essentials, is relatively easy, but we're really bad at it, and that's got to change. So lesson 1, blow up your CMS. Just obliterate it. Content management systems are fine for doing one thing, shoveling content online. They are terrible, terrible for storytelling. So let me show you an example. This is a story from 2007, a Pulitzer Prize-winning series, actually, by Walt Bogdanich and Jake Hooker. This story changed the way the US thinks about trade with China. It tracked poison drugs, poison paint that were going on children's toys. It absolutely changed the way we think about China, trade with China. Does this look like a story, just looking at it, that looks like it changed the way we think about China? It does not. So here we have just your standard template, just your sort of boring New York Times look and feel. Here on the left, we have our stack of multimedia, right? As if multimedia is something separate, something that you kind of drape onto a story once you've done it and you've put it online. And then the thing that drives me absolutely crazy, 8 pages of pagination at the bottom. Who the heck is going to go down to that? I mean, you all had this, right? This experience where you're reading the story online and you think, wow, this is pretty good. I'm sticking with this. You get to the bottom and you see just 8 pages of pagination. You're like, oh my God. How am I going to commit to that? Right? It's enough to just absolutely put you into a rage. And then there's this, snowfall. You're right. I mean, I think this did blow everybody's mind. Has anybody not seen snowfall? Has anybody not seen this? Okay, a few of you. So we're going to take a look at it. And against all sense, I'm going to do a live demo here, which is terrifying, because you know the internet's never going to work. But oh, hey, look at that. We're okay. So snowfall. You'll notice we've completely broken out of our standard article template. At the top of it, you have a loop, a video loop, that tells you, wow, this is different, this is special, this is unique. I'm going to zip all the way down to the bottom here really quickly. What don't you see at the bottom? No pagination. This is a 17,000-word piece. And by the way, just as a sidelight, how proud am I to work at a news organization where the first draft of this comes in at 17,000 words or 18,000 words, and the editors go, yeah, that's about right. Let's go with that. But you can already tell this has a very special look and feel to it. But let's break this down a little bit. So as you can scroll down, you'll notice that the multimedia is not draped on the side as something separate. It's right in line with the story, right? To cue you that there's something new and something going on here. That this is actually part of the story, not just a sidelight to the story. And then there's this, which when I first saw it, took my breath away. And every time I see it, it's spectacular. Do you see how the infographic, this flyover, which is always a crowd pleaser, this flyover is actually like background wallpaper to the story. It's not separate. It's actually part of the story and kind of anchors it. So this whole idea of flowing through a piece of journalism and having the infographics be an integral part of it, that is inherently native digital, right? It's not separate. And then there's little touches like this. Oops, I'm going to have to reload this because I already scrolled through it. As you get down to this one piece, which I love. Oops, I did it again. Here. Do you see how the skier comes out of nowhere? To me, that's even cooler than the flyover in some ways. Because that little detail, that little surprising element that tells you, hey, there's something here. Who is not going to click on that video? And I'll tell you, looking at the analytics for this story, more people watched this video by orders of magnitude, or these videos, than normal readers did. This blew us away. But I also want to point out one other thing about snowfall. And it's right here. There are 16 people on this story. And they worked on this for weeks and months. Snowfall is, in a sense, the exception, not the rule, right? But we still, as news organizations, need to be thinking about native digital storytelling all the time and the ways that we can apply these lessons to what we do. So let's go back. Let's imagine Snowfall in a previous universe. Here's how we might have produced this story in 2007. Typical look and feel. Here's your stack of interactives. And then, I don't know, right? 17,000 words, people. Okay? You laugh, but honestly, you look at our magazine every week. Look at our magazine. You'll see like 10, 12, 14 links up there. Okay? All right. Lesson 2. Storytelling takes many, many forms. And sometimes it's not even in the form of what we would consider to be a traditional narrative, a printed narrative, a broadcast piece. This is an example I love to cite. This is a game, actually, that PBS produced. They did a series, I don't know, it's like 8 years ago now. This is pretty old, called People Like Us. And what you do here is you come and you fill up this room. On the left, you're going to get all kinds of different options of things that you can fill this room up with. And based on your choices, it's going to tell you what class you are, right? So if you put in, things that are sort of like typically lower class, it'll tell you that, typically upper class. And so by doing this game, you're actually sort of learning something about yourself. And the BBC did a very similar thing last year. Where they went to sociologists, and they started asking questions like, does the traditional class system still make any sense? And so rather than tell that story, they did do a regular story, but in some ways, the interactive actually tells that story better. So think in terms of non-narrative storytelling. Here, this is something we call the lively morgue. It's all photo-driven. One of the things that my team does is social media, as I mentioned. And the lively morgue, we were trying to figure out how to do Tumblr right. We don't do a lot on Tumblr, but we were trying to figure out how to do Tumblr right. And one thing that works really, really well on Tumblr is photography. Incredibly well. But we're also not going to throw a bunch of pictures online and call it a day. We're going to do something interesting. So Lexi Mainland, who's our social media editor, came up with this idea of using the archive. Going to our archive. We have the next door in the building, in the old Herald Tribune building, in the basement is the New York Times archive, where there's like 4.5 million images, of which maybe 0.5% have ever been seen publicly. And so we started going through, but if you're very, very good, you may notice immediately something about this. Is anybody picking up on it? Okay, so here's a train with a propeller. Next photo. Here's a plane with a propeller. Here's a bunch of planes flying. Here's a bunch of people looking at a radar of flying aircraft. Right? Well, these are military people. Here's more military people watching a rocket. And there's another rocket. You get it? Every photo leads to the next one. It's a little Easter egg. And so as you follow this, you pick up on the narrative. There's like 300 and some photos in this. We're doing one a day. And at the end of it, you will be able to do. When they were setting this up, they were in a conference room with all of them laid out on the floor, one after another, just to see how the narrative flow works. So storytelling can come in a lot of forms. There's also another little Easter egg here. If you click on it, you'll get to see the back of the photo. And on the back of the photo is really, like, a lot of times something really interesting stuff. It tells you a little about it, and it gives you a sense of, like, this is how we used to manage photos back in the day. Other kinds of storytelling take game form. This is a piece that our multimedia team did. The story was a magazine piece about stupid, hyper-addictive games. And so what's the right way to accompany that article? With a stupid, addictive game. And so they actually built a game that you could play, and you could blow up the entire page, including the ad units, which is pretty awesome. We had to get special permission for that. Okay, lessons 3 and 4. Do it live. The web and digital are live media, right? Not something that people want to see yesterday's news. You want to see things live, now. Immediacy is fundamental to digital native storytelling. But don't do it alone. You want to make sure that the web is also very social. So you don't want to be doing this thinking in terms of the traditional broadcast model, where it's that voice of God. We speak, you listen. If you were here yesterday for Mariana's talk about The Guardian, I think The Guardian is embracing this in ways that I wish we would. Storytelling is inherently social on the web. So some examples. During the tensions in the Korean Peninsula, we turned to our readers. We wanted to gather sources, just in case. How did we do it? We built a little platform, and we put a solicitation up, both on the web and via social channels in both Korean and English, asking people, hey, if you live here, we want to know. We want to know who you are. We may want to contact you. Over 24 hours, we had 700 responses from people who are living on the Korean Peninsula who were willing to be essentially sources for the New York Times. I mean, that blew the minds of the foreign desk. But we never do this kind of stuff. Why? Why don't we turn to our own readers more often? This is our live dashboard from Oscar night. Oscars are a very big deal for the New York Times, right? It's one of our big events. It's one of the things people turn to us for. And the live dashboard brings together social media. It's kind of the whole enchilada. It brings together a live stream down here, and you can see what that looks like there. Live stream down there. We had live video going with Tony Scott and our chief film critic and David Carr. This is when Lincoln was getting its Academy Award. And then on the right, we had a Twitter stream, but that's not just a kind of a pointless Twitter stream. What we were actually doing was David and Tony periodically were sort of asking questions of readers. How is Seth MacFarlane doing? Is this the most boring show you've ever seen in your life? Whatever it is. And then we were bringing certain key responses onto the page, but we were doing it in real time, right? So this brings together the live blog feel, a live video stream, and social media into one package. And then just as a cherry on top on the right, we also added a game. So you could go and you could fill out a ballot, and then on Oscar night, we would actually score your ballot. And yes, that is my ballot. I got, I think, a total of 8 right. I had a terrible, terrible, terrible year predicting the Oscars. Here's another live dashboard. This is one for the presidential debates. And here, too, we're using social as a way to kind of bring sort of both immediacy to the presentation, but also bringing our readers into the process itself. So on the right, which you can't see here now, but what was there on debate night, you could post a question to us during the debate. I mean, these things would go on for 2 hours. So you could post a question during the debate. And we had a team of reporters who were answering those questions in real time and then posting them into the stream. So you get the idea of like casting into social and bringing it back, casting out, bringing back. That's a totally traditional, totally effective strategy for us. Another example of live was Sandy. This was a very, very interesting experiment for us because we had never run one of these dashboards for more than about 2 hours. And when we went up and pitched this as the sort of to anchor our live coverage, we didn't realize it was going to run for like 8 straight days, which was interesting, to say the least. There was a little bit of hacking going on to keep that thing going. But what's interesting about our Sandy coverage is a sort of traditional way to cover an event like Sandy is to do what we call a lead-all, right? So you write a story, and then you update it, update it, update it, update it. And then at the end of the day, you finish with that story, and you put it into the newspaper. And then what do you do the next morning? You start another story, right? So this hurricane was like an 8-day event. As a breaking news event. It was like 8 days. That's a terrible way of covering an 8-day event. Because in real life, we, human beings, don't react like a printed newspaper, right? We don't have a distribution schedule. We don't think in 24-hour increments. It's a live event that's going on constantly. So what we did was we anchored pretty much our entire coverage to this dashboard. And this ran perpetually, 8 days, and we kept posting things to it. And we kept saying to people, like, if you want to know what's going on right now, this is the place to go. We had never done that before. And this worked like crazy. This is what we were doing for the Boston bombing. Again, very live. We make live a very big deal when we do it. You can see it there in the center. So think in terms of immediate live. Think in terms of casting out, pulling back, using your social channels, and turning to your readers. All of those are inherently digital. All right, lesson 5. You do not need an army to do this kind of stuff. Yes, my team is big. It's 37 people. It wasn't always 37 people. It was 3 when we started 6 years ago. There are news organizations out there that are frankly kicking our butts with 2 or 3 people. And I'll show you a couple of them. This is an example from the Bay Citizen, which is a relatively small news organization based in San Francisco. They did this tracking bicycle accidents in the Bay Area, where they were clustered, where really it's the most dangerous to bike, which is a very big deal in San Francisco. And they built this pretty much entirely. This version of it has been updated a couple of times, but the original version of this was built entirely using Google Fusion tables. And it was basically 2 people who built it. And it's a great piece of journalism. This is an example from WNYC, which is our local New York public radio affiliate. This is what they were. This is the Oscars. See, this is the Iowa caucuses. You know, our bizarre presidential election system starts with the Iowa caucuses. John Keefe, who built this, he built it himself. He learned to code about 5 years ago. Had never written a line of computer code, and taught himself to do it. He did this project over Christmas at the table at his mother's house at her kitchen table. And what he did was, Google did an experiment. They made a deal with the Republican Party to get results. And we, the rest of the media, went with the Associated Press, which is the typical way we get these results. Well, guess what? Google was about 15 minutes faster than everyone else. And John figured out how to tap into that data stream. And so here's little WNYC with this little map that's 15 minutes ahead of everyone else, including CNN, the New York Times, LA Times, everyone. It's one guy. So you don't need an army to do this. This is a piece about that was Wired Italy about hospitals and medical costs. And this is, I think, and this also is Wired Italy, but I think this is an even better example. This is data that they fought for. Now, there is no freedom of information law in Italy. There's no right to access to data in Italy. There is no tradition of computer-assisted reporting or data journalism in Italy. But the people who built this, including Guido Romeo and Elisabetta Tola, fought and fought and fought to get this data. And they did. But how did it come? It came as PDFs. So they had to build this database of like 45,000 schools from scratch. And what they wanted to know is how many of those schools are, A, sitting near or on fault lines in very seismic areas of the country, because Italy is a very earthquake-prone country, and how many of them have been both inspected for and are safe in case of an earthquake. And they found that 50% of the schools were sitting on fault lines and were in serious danger of falling apart if there were to be a significant earthquake. Wow, that story kind of writes itself. And they built this app to show it. So if they can do it, in a country where there's no tradition of data journalism, no tradition of online journalism to speak of, no freedom of information law, and it's basically two people and some friends, believe me, anyone can. Okay, where to begin? First of all, there are no more excuses. None. There's no excuse for not doing this kind of stuff, okay? When we started my team about 6 years ago, it was much harder. There were not as many tools available to you to do this kind of work free or at little cost. And I mean free in terms of cost, but also little cost in terms of effort. Google Fusion tables did not exist 6 years ago, and there are multiple news organizations now building deep, rich, data-driven interactives using free tools, platforms like Google Fusion tables, that are absolutely free and scale like crazy. We don't, because it would break if we used it because our scale is too big. But for smaller and medium-sized news organizations, Fusion tables are amazing. Amazon Web Services had just been launched when we launched 6 years ago. You know, putting servers in the cloud, making them available to anybody. Now there are a million ways of getting a data-driven like news app online. So there are really no excuses. Lots of people talk about doing this stuff, but and frankly, the only route is doing it. Get out there and just start. Look around, look for some data, and just start doing this kind of stuff. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. This is the biggest lesson that I can convey. Do not wait for permission, because you will not get it. You absolutely will not get it. Your IT staff will tell you a million reasons why the newsroom shouldn't be building web apps, why the newsroom shouldn't be running servers, why the newsroom shouldn't have hackers working on this kind of stuff. They'll give you a million reasons. And if you look hard enough, you'll always find someone to say no. So don't. Just start doing it and plead forgiveness. Don't ask permission. This is my friend Matt Waite's advice. Demo it, don't memo it. If you can show somebody something, however ugly it is, however hacky it is, however minimally functional it is, however ugly it is, if you can show somebody something, the inkling of a good idea, that is so much more powerful than writing it in a big memo form that nobody will ever look at, right? Demo it, don't memo it. And finally, a lot of people don't realize that those people that you need to do this kind of stuff are right there in your organization. Okay, so here's a pro tip for you. If you don't have staff right now in your newsroom, and this is a common refrain, if you don't have staff in your newsroom to work on this stuff, I guarantee you that people who would be interested in working with you are in your news organization. They're probably just not in the newsroom. They're probably in the IT department. So you see this guy? How to find him? See this guy here? I have no idea who this is, but it doesn't matter. So just go look in your IT department for anybody's computer that has a bunch of stickers on it, just like this. I'm not kidding you. No, this is no joke. Go look for people who have stickers that allude to some weird esoteric technology, or that are like open data, or transparency related, or where it's a civic hacking organization. Go look for those people. I guarantee you, you go up to them and you say, hey, I have this idea, and I need some help. I need somebody who knows how to do this stuff. They will be, 9 times out of 10, they'll jump at that chance. Because mostly, IT jobs kind of suck. They do. They do. They're really boring. And you get told what to do. You get handed a big requirements document. A designer is going to hand you design specs that tell you exactly what color, how many pixels, where everything needs to be. You don't get to make decisions about any of this stuff. You just kind of execute other people's ideas. Only in the newsroom do technologists, like the people who work for me, get to author their own stories. Their stories are just written in computer code and not in traditional broadcast or print. And so, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions. And I'm told that people are often reluctant to ask questions in big rooms like this, but you're going to prove me wrong because I deliberately left all this time to talk to you people. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Really? Really? This was so thorough and so convincing that, oh, there we go, thank God.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Just in terms of different platforms and how you work now that mobile's becoming more and more important, even Snowfall, you know, there are limitations. You had to sort of, no autoplay on some of the videos, etc. How are you working? Are you working mobile first, or how are you working now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like The Guardian, again, if you were there yesterday, like The Guardian, about 30% of our traffic is mobile. That includes tablet, which I sort of think is different, but we'll just go with it for the purposes of this conversation. And that's growing, and it's growing. So we have actually changed our process enormously. Like for the election, the last election, the presidential election, everything we built online, we had to also build in a mobile form or make it mobile friendly. It's not optional anymore. And soon, I would say, mobile first will probably be the way we do everything. Now, for these bigger sort of interactive pieces, they don't always work in mobile, so we sometimes have to do a version that's kind of mobile friendly and a version that's more web friendly. But yeah, we are definitely moving in that direction. And I probably shouldn't say this, but no one is praying for the Microsoft Surface to fail more than me. And I'll tell you why. Because building for mobile, quote unquote mobile, is like the Wild West. Anyone who's ever done it knows what I'm talking about. You build for all the different flavors of Android, all the different form factors of Android devices. You know, you've got the big tablet, the big phone, the small phone. It's craziness. So, you know, it is kind of nice for us because most of our traffic still is iOS. But every month when we get that report, I can see that little line, that Android line, just getting a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger, and it terrifies me. So I'm hopeful that where we are not right now is all those tools that I showed you that make web development so easy and so scalable with a small team. That doesn't exist yet in the phone world. So it is, the answer is yes, but it still scares the heck out of me. Okay, now we're cooking with questions.
Yes, thank you for a very interesting talk. I just had a question about how the work of your team, how it connects with the New York Times business model. Do you have to fight for every dollar? You said you were 3 people in the beginning, now you're 37?
Yeah. So weirdly, I haven't had to fight too much. We've kind of proven ourselves by doing things. And we've taken over substantial pieces that our technology department used to. So now, actually, I am part of the technology department. I came to the Times in 2005 as a reporter, actually. And then in 2006, started this team and moved over to the technology side. But we are actually both newsroom and technology. So my team is physically located in the newsroom, even though the technologists on it are part of the technology department, and I am. So we've taken over substantial chunks of what the technology department used to do, like elections. We took that over. Olympics, we took that over. You know, those kind of editorial, the big kind of specialty editorial projects, those big, big heaves. So that's part of the answer, right, is that we've added capacity and we've removed certain things from the broader technology department. We are a newsroom desk, so we don't have revenue goals or anything like that. We're not, you know, on the hook to drive a certain amount of revenue. But there's 3 ways that my team contributes, right? First of all, our stuff gets a lot of page views, as it turns out. The stuff that we do is very, very popular, and particularly on social. So we're pulling in people from the outside. We're attracting new readers. If you look at our Oscar ballot, because we've built it so intimately into social, it is so deeply connected to social. The average age of people who come in via the Oscar ballot, fill out an Oscar ballot, is significantly lower than the average age of a New York Times reader. So we're bringing in the readers of tomorrow. That's one way. The second way is sponsorships. We don't, again, have any, you know, we don't have a revenue goal or anything like that. But as it turns out, advertisers like the stuff that we do, because advertisers want to put their brand on something that is new. Advertisers love launches, right? They love to put their brand on something new and shiny. And as it turns out, that's what we do, is we launch new things. That's pretty much all we do, actually, is launch new things. So that works out pretty well. And finally, we've started dabbling in white label syndication. So our Olympics project, you'll see in the New York Times, we make a very big deal about Olympics. It's a huge thing. But that entire platform, we then also have sold for the London Olympics, we had like 12 clients. One of them was The Guardian, as a matter of fact. Hi, Mariana, how are you? We were actually pretty thrilled to have The Guardian involved, and they made a beautiful site out of the data that they bought from us. So that's another way. We got. Oh, hi.
I'm here.
There you are. Hi.
I was just wondering, like, when you plan a story like Snowfall, how do you kind of start working with it? I mean, do you decide we want these elements, or do you have the elements, or do you send somebody out to get them? And
well, I can tell you
what's
how.
the process?
Yeah. So again, I didn't have any involvement in Snowfall at all. Just to be very clear about that. That was a graphics and design project, but I can tell you how that came about. Is Steve Duenas, who's the graphics editor, had it in his head that they needed to do something really special around this piece. They knew that it was going to be this, 17,000-word magnum opus. And I showed earlier what Snowfall would have looked like in sort of the standard template. I mean, you just can't even imagine doing something like that, right? Well, actually, you can. There's way too many news sites that would just, throw it online like that and then wonder why nobody's clicking on any link past number 1. So they sat down. He went to the sports editor, and I have a slide somewhere where I have the original drawing that Steve did, where he sketched it out, and he's like, no, here's what we want to do. And then as you come down, there's going to be these infographics that kind of come into frame. And he had to sort of convince Joe Sexton, who was the sports editor at the time, that that was going to work. And eventually he did. And so then you have a group of designers, a group of graphic artists, of graphics editors, the reporter, John Branch, and the sports editor working together collaboratively, looking at designs, building it out, and that's how you end up with a Snowfall. That's the same process we use. I mean, the projects that we do that are really successful, that are really good, are absolutely collaborative. It involves reporters, editors, coders, designers, you name it, all sitting around a table, basically doing what might be described in other context as product development, right? Product conceptualization and building. And it's kind of cool. It's something that didn't used to happen in a newsroom before, but that's what's happening, in mine anyway, and some others. Other question?
My turn? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for coming here, telling your story. So interesting. I was wondering, maybe I misunderstood, but you were talking about something with your audience, right? The readers. And you said something about you wanted more contact with your readers,
Yeah.
but you don't do that often that you want. Did I understand you right? And that's my question. Does that mean you have to have more people to do it? Are you unsure of how to get the audience to get to New York Times Digital?
So if my boss is watching this, and in the event that maybe my boss streams it, the answer is yes, I would like more people. But to answer your question, the answer is yes. We aren't doing it as much. Okay, royal we, as an industry, we are not doing it as much as we should, and we, the New York Times, are not doing it as much as we should. In the case of the South Korea example, I mean, the foreign desk was pulling its hair out, trying to figure out how are we going to, if missiles start flying in the Korean Peninsula, how the heck are you going to cover something like that? I mean, we have reporters on the ground, but that's a story that is going to go beyond, the standard sort of what reporters are capable of doing. That's going to be a people story, big time. And so how do you get at that? How do you prepare for something like that? And so when we've put this solicitation online and like 24 hours later, boom, we had 700 responses. Some of them were just incredible. People filled out a long form, put in, like, that just gives you this sort of idea that, wow, we really are not tapping this resource anywhere near the way we should as reporters, right, as journalists. And so I think, you look at examples out there, like I said before, like what The Guardian is doing with its open journalism project. You look at what American Public Media is doing. That's the Minnesota Public Radio. It's my home state is Minnesota. But Minnesota Public Radio has had a project for, gosh, over a decade, where they have collected these, what they call sources, which are listeners. And in the process of having listeners join this network, the listeners tell them, okay, so I'm an accountant. I also serve on this nonprofit board. Here are some of my interests and hobbies. And when they're doing a story that says, wow, we're doing this story and we have this document, but we really can't make heads or tails, we really want to turn to someone who has some expertise, the reporter can then go right into that network and say, find me all the accountants who are in here who can help me understand this document. And so it becomes this sort of like sourcing technique. That is where we all need to go, right? In that direction. This is where we need to go. It's crowdsourcing, whatever you want to call it, is way too random right now. And organizations, not just the New York Times, that have this kind of scale and reach should be using it, and we're just not. We're just not. I mean, we have, 8 million followers or something like that on Twitter and 2 million followers on Facebook, and we get 60 million or so uniques a month. And why are we not tapping that audience more successfully or more thoughtfully is beyond me. And by the way, I need more people. Questions? All right. Oh, there's one.
Thank you for a great presentation. I'm just wondering, so you have a lot of, let's say you start somewhere, you have a lot of documentation. It might be unique, you worked hard to get it, but you don't know quite where you want to go with it. So my question is, how and where do you start, and when do you know when you're finished?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. So the answer is, that for a lot of our projects, we're never finished. We're not, you know. We have a lot of things that are very time-based, right? And that's actually the kind of the thing about, that's the piece of being a journalist that I actually always enjoyed, because I am by nature a procrastinator. And if I don't have a gun to my head deadline, you know, I would get nothing done. It was a minor miracle. I was telling people earlier, you know, usually I'm the guy at a conference who is, you know, finishing the PowerPoint as I'm walking up to the podium. I actually finished this 24 hours ago. I had started it a week ago. That's just completely unusual for me. I don't know, maybe I'm changing in my old age, but our projects really, they either are finished when we've run out of time and we just go with whatever we have, or or we just say we're done with this. We just deliberately say we're done. Or in some cases, they just keep going. And we do a lot of iterating. We've built, for example, the Oscars, right? The Oscars we've done now 5 years. We took this project over 5 years ago and started it as a game. We have done this sort of live video thing for the last 3 years, and we keep iterating on it each year, each year, each year, each year. And so how do we know when we're done? I think when we're satisfied with it, I think, or when we've run out of time. That's probably the best answer. All right. Thank you very much.